All right, today we're going to go through 8.3. Last section we talked about the Articles of Confederation and a need for the Constitution, how that was created, and the Constitutional Convention and so on, the Virginia Plan, the Great Compromise, etc. Today we are going to start with how we ratified the Constitution. If you remember back to last section, we talked about the word ratification. Essentially, that means to just approve something. So all the states need to go through an approval process one by one to approve the Constitution, ratify it, and hopefully this Prezi is a little more streamlined for you, easier to read. I think it will be. So let's get moving. First of all, one American story today. This man right here, Samuel Huntington, was a big part of ratifying the Constitution, but for a week in early January of 1788, a church in Hartford, Connecticut was filled to capacity inside. 168 delegates were meeting to decide whether their state should ratify the U.S. Constitution. Samuel Huntington was Connecticut's governor, and he addressed the assembly. And don't write this down, I just want you to read it along with me. It says, "This is a new event in the history of mankind. Heretofore, most government have been formed by tyrants and imposed on mankind by force. Never before did a people in time of peace and tranquility meet together by their representatives and, with calm deliberation, frame for themselves a system of government." So the governor of Connecticut supported this new constitution. He wanted to see it ratified, but not everyone agreed with him. So in this section today, in section 3, we will learn about the debates that led to the ratification of the Constitution. So by the time the convention in Connecticut opened, Americans had already been debating this new constitution for quite a long time, months. The document had been printed in newspapers. It was also handed out in pamphlets across the U.S., and the framers of the Constitution knew that the document would cause controversy. So they immediately began to campaign for ratification or approval of the Constitution. The framers suspected that people might be afraid the Constitution would take too much power away from the states. So to get rid of this fear, to take this fear head on, the framers explained that the Constitution was based on federalism. By definition, federalism is a system of government in which power is shared between the central or federal government and the states. Linking themselves to the idea of federalism, the people who supported the Constitution took the name Federalists. So here, it's a little off to the side, but you can see, Alexander Hamilton. This is a picture of him. But basically, they were going for a government that had a strong central federal government. Those who opposed the Constitution were known as anti-federalists. They thought the Constitution took too much power away from the states. They did not guarantee rights for the people. Some were afraid that a strong president might be declared king. Others thought the Senate might turn into a powerful aristocracy. In either case, the liberties won at great cost during the Revolution might be lost. So anti-federalists published their views about the Constitution in newspapers and pamphlets. They used logical arguments to convince people to oppose the Constitution. But they also tried to stir people's emotions by charging that it would destroy American liberties. As one anti-federalist wrote, "After so recent a triumph over British despots or oppressive rulers, it is truly astonishing that a set of men among ourselves should have had the effrontery or nerve to attempt the destruction of our liberties." So, mostly they were afraid that the government might have too much power, and they felt that we definitely needed a Bill of Rights to protect the average American citizen. Now, the Federalists did not sit well with the Anti-Federalists and attacking the Constitution. So the Federalists wrote essays to answer the Anti-Federalist attacks. The best known of the Federalist essays are the Federalist Papers. These essays first appeared as letters to the different New York newspapers, and they were later published together in a book called The Federalist. 3 well-known politicians wrote the Federalist Papers. They were later, very famous people, including presidents. James Madison, you see here in the top left, he was president number 4. And then down here we have Alexander Hamilton. And then over here we have John Jay. He was the Secretary of Foreign Affairs for the Confederation Congress. But like the Anti-Federalists, the Federalists appealed to reason and emotion. And in the Federalist Papers, Hamilton described why people should support ratification. And he wrote in Federalist number 1, "Yes, my countrymen, I am clearly of opinion it is in your interest to adopt it, the Constitution. I am convinced that this is the safest course for your liberty, your dignity, and your happiness." The Federalists had an important advantage over the Anti-Federalists in the fact that most of the newspapers supported the Constitution, which gave them more publicity than the Anti-Federalists. Even so, there was strong opposition to ratification in Massachusetts, North Carolina, Rhode Island, New York, and Virginia. If some of these states didn't ratify the Constitution, the U.S. might not have made it. There was a very real threat there. So by June of 1787, 9 states ratified the Constitution. Some of the first ones were Delaware, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, then Georgia and Connecticut, and then Massachusetts later on. That meant the document was officially ratified, but New York and Virginia had not yet cast their votes, and there were many powerful anti-federalists in both New York and Virginia. Without Virginia, the new government would lack the support of the largest, most populous state, and without New York, the nation would be separated into 2 parts geographically. And actually, this line here, I left it there for a reason, because if we took New York right here and we cut it in half, how are Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Maine, New Hampshire, how are these areas of current-day United States, how are they going to exist with New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Virginia, the Carolinas, and Georgia? It would have made it very, very difficult. So Virginia's convention opened the first day of June, or the first week in June, and a patriot that you've heard of, Patrick Henry, he fought against ratification. And then perhaps one of the most influential Virginians, aside from George Washington, George Mason, was also opposed to it. Mason was a delegate to the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, but he refused to sign the final document. Both Henry and Mason would not consider voting for the Constitution until a Bill of Rights was added. A Bill of Rights was a set of rules that defines people's rights. So James Madison was also at Virginia's convention, and he suggested that Virginia follow Massachusetts' lead and ratify the Constitution, and he recommended the addition of a Bill of Rights. So with the addition of a Bill of Rights likely, Virginia ratified the Constitution at the end of June. So the news of Virginia's vote arrived while the New York Convention was in debate. The Anti-Federalists had outnumbered the Federalists when the convention began, but with the news of Virginia's ratification, New Yorkers decided that they would join the Union too, but they also called for a Bill of Rights. Finally, in 1790, North Carolina ratified the Constitution, and then Rhode Island became the last state to ratify it. So by then the new Congress had already written a Bill of Rights, and they'd submit it to the states for approval. Here you can see this is Patrick Henry on the left. Here's George Mason on the right. So finally, with the Bill of Rights, at the same time that seven of the states ratified the Constitution, they also asked that it be amended to include a Bill of Rights. Supporters of a Bill of Rights hoped that it would set forth the rights of all Americans. They believed it was needed to protect people against the power of the national government. Madison, who was elected to new Congress in the winter of 1789, he took up the cause and he proposed a set of changes to the Constitution. Congress then edited Madison's list and proposed placing the amendments at the end of the Constitution in a separate section. The amendments went to the states for ratification, and as with the Constitution, 3/4 of the states had to ratify these amendments for them to take effect. With Virginia's vote in 1791, 10 of the amendments were ratified and became law, and these 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution became known as the Bill of Rights. Now this is very important because the passage of the Bill of Rights was one of the first acts of the new government. So that concludes Chapter 8, and then in Chapter 9 we'll take a quick look at some of the other issues that face the new government.